Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Movement Mentality podcast. I have my very close and dear friend, Anna Hartman, with me. Anna, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We just connected for like 30 minutes before the podcast even started, but her and I could talk about all the things for a very long time, from personal to business to body to who knows, everything in between, weather. So actually, now that I have you on, it'd be kind of cool to tell everyone how we met. And then, I mean, I'll never forget our first date because everything that came up in a very short amount of time, like probably 20 minutes into meeting each other, we were like, you too?
Yeah.
No way. You too? Do you want to do karate in the garage? It just
Did we just
like
become best friends?
Yeah, did we just become best friends? Like, it was a wild, very quick connection. So, just welcome to my podcast. Tell people a little bit about yourself and then maybe get into how we met, and then we'll
Yeah.
just kind of get the ball rolling from there.
Yeah. Um, who am I? Who am I? Yeah, my name's Anna Hartman. I am an athletic trainer and I've been an athletic trainer for 23 years. I'm from California. I still live in California now after a 14-year hiatus in Arizona. So we kind of flip-flop spots now, which sucks, but I for the last 11 almost 11 years have run my business called Movement Rev, and created my own unique, well, I didn't create it. I I figured out what made me very unique in the way I practice. So I turned that into the Movement Rev methodology that I teach to people, which is basically blending osteopathic medicine and traditional orthopedic based like sports medicine together in its own unique process. So that's kind of that's how we met too, a little bit, is through Instagram. I had just moved to San Diego and I'm not sure how I came across your Instagram, just like the algorithm, I guess, because I don't remember necessarily someone saying like follow this person or like I love Missy stuff or whatever. It was just like I was seeing your stuff. I had followed you for whatever reason, and then you had mentioned how you're in San Diego, and I was like, wait, I'm in San Diego. And I also had watched enough of your stuff that I was like, she's kind of talking about similar stuff to me. Like we have a similar approach. Like, and also I need friends. So I wonder if I can ask her to meet up and if she'd think I was crazy. So I reached out and I was like, "Hey, you don't know me, but I live in I live in San Diego. Um, if you're up for coffee, I'd love to buy you a coffee or a drink or something like that." And then you're like, "Yeah, totally." And then we didn't for a while, and then we finally like got back around to it. But I think maybe you followed me, so then we like kind of interacted, and then we met for we ended up meeting for drinks one day at a cute little bar in Pacific Beach in the afternoon. And yeah, like Missy said, we sat down and started talking, and I shared my philosophy at that time about, like where I was, because that was the very beginning of me sort of like organizing my thoughts around what am I, like what was Movement Rev, like what does make it unique. And so I sort of pitched you my thoughts, and you were like, what? This is how I see things. I've never talked to somebody else who sees things the same. And then you explained the neurology stuff and how you approach working with people. And I was like, what? Somebody else does this in a different way, but arrives at like the same, like 30,000 foot view of it. And I was like, that's cool. And then we got started talking about personal stuff, and like you said, I was like, oh, I shared about my mom passing away from lung cancer. And you're like, what? My mom passed away from cancer. And then I was like, yeah, it was really hard because it was right around when my sister had a brain surgery. And you're like, wait, what? My sister had brain surgery. And so then we were like, what? How is this possible?
It's
So and
just
then,
so weird. Like,
yeah,
it's
so
just
weird. So what
parallel
Exactly.
matrix
What started
universes.
as like a very like, well, I don't want to say it was like very professional, but what started as like a professional connection like quickly turned into like, are you my person? Like, and then yeah, we started hanging out, and then I met Ryan, like I started obviously I met you, invited me to your wedding. It was like it was before you guys were married, and we had only hung out a couple times, and you're like, hey, I know it's last minute, but there's a couple people who had RSVP'd but couldn't come to the wedding, so we have some open seats. I'd love to have you there. And I was like, sure. And I think that was actually the first time I met Ryan, was at your guys' wedding.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I don't think I had met Ryan before that. And
Oh my goodness.
right, and then and my
I
favorite
know.
I'm gonna say my two of my favorite parts about your wedding. One, that Alyssa and I sat next to each other and like didn't even realize it, because then we like reconnected and like on the internet and became friends. And then you're like, wait, you
Later.
guys sat next to each other at my wedding. I'm like, we did. And then every time I see Matt and Kathy through you, you're like, have you guys met? And we're like, yes, we were at we sat at the same table at your wedding. Like every time, yes, Matt and Kathy,
The
we
worst.
know each other now.
Yes, I know. Like, I specifically put you at the Z Health table, is what I
Yeah,
call, like,
so
quote
you could
unquote.
talk
This
more.
is,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm like, she's gonna be fine. She's gonna start talking to these people and they're gonna be like, oh my gosh, you're
yeah,
amazing. That's so, yes, I do that still to this day to everyone I know. Like,
yeah.
hey, have you met?
Have you met?
Have you
Yeah,
met my
I'm like,
husband? And
yes,
people are like,
yes.
I've I've met your husband like 7 times. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. I don't know what my bandwidth just doesn't,
It's okay.
like, your memory, like, you remember everything, and I'm like, "How does she do that?" And I'm like, we have some opposite things, you and I, like, there's a
Yeah,
lot of parallels, and then there's some where we're like, "Wait,
yeah,
whoa."
totally opposite.
That's one of them
Yeah,
where I just it doesn't stay.
yeah. But then it was funny because like after your wedding, then when we hung out more and I got to know Ryan more, I was like, oh my god, Ryan reminds me of one of like my best friends from high school who were guys. I'll actually also name Ryan, like Russ and Ryan. I was like, Ryan, like literally is like, I was like, I love Ryan. Like, he's one of my favorite people. And it was just like really cool to meet you and us be so similar, but then to meet Ryan. And actually, I'm like, Ryan and I have a lot of similarities too. And then I worked with Ryan through training and just got to like see how cool, like, and how his brain worked. And so I love that I got to become friends with both of you, yes, together, but also separately too, which was kind of cool. So, and then you
I
guys
mean, that's
left
the
me, and
best.
now I'm sad.
I know, and they were like, "Hey, we love you, bye." I mean, that's the best thing. Yeah, like, you it's just so crazy that you sent out a message just like, "Hey, 1, I need
Random.
friends. I just moved here. This chick's talking about eyeballs. I don't know." And I'm like, "What?" First of all, I said yes. Like, who? I don't know. It's like, "Yeah, that sounds great."
Yeah, sure.
And I'm being serious when I say this. I remember the feeling in the center of my body when you were talking about how you see movement and pain and healing. And I was like, I genuinely haven't met someone else who thinks in the way that I parallel think. Not that we think the same, but it's the same way
Yeah.
where I
Yeah,
think
like
in
the
that moment,
overarching principles.
it's like if your shoulder hurts, it's probably not your shoulder type of thinking. And I was like, oh, I would go to the lower cervicals. And you're like, well, it's probably visceral, but we're going to, I don't know. And I was just like, it like opened a window of hope for me that I wasn't alone,
Yeah.
because I do feel very lonely in the way that I think.
Yeah.
Because even though I have taken a path with very specific certifications, I still don't think that I think like they all do that take, you know what I mean? Like, I still feel
Yeah.
different.
Well, and I think too, like, not only in the way we looked at work, but then when I was like, oh, my mom died from cancer, and you're like, mine too. And then with the added complexity of our sisters going through the brain surgeries at like around the same times, it was like, oh my gosh, like somebody actually gets it.
Like, really gets it.
And it is, and I'm sure you felt this too. Like, it's like when your parents die, you're in this weird club, right? And like people don't get it until their parents die. And then they're like, oh my God, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I was a shitty friend. And I'm like, you weren't, like, you weren't, you just hadn't experienced it yet. And so I think that's a little bit of it, is like in that moment, we're like, oh my gosh, like we're in the same club. And then we're in like, even within this club, we're in a very like, you know, specific cohort of this club that also went through this other like very traumatic thing, and like is it really like still grieving all of it, so it was like, yeah, of course you remember how you felt, because it was like whenever you feel like you belong somewhere, it's like feeling at home. And for us who have lost our parents, like this feeling of belonging and this feeling of like, I don't want to be like being a lost boy, but like you lose this anchor to this feeling of being home. And so when you find people that like are feeling the same way, that gives you this like home feeling a
Yeah.
little bit. So
No,
yeah.
that is a good way to put it. I'm crying
Yeah.
already.
You told me to grab the
I did. I was like, grab a tissue, but I don't even have tissues. I have a sleeve. But yeah, that I've never heard it said that way. Like you
yeah.
lose that anchor to
Yeah.
home. You know, it's so effed up.
Yes, it is.
It's really effed up. My mom died in 2015. Literally still have her number in my
100%.
favorites on
Yeah.
my phone. I remember someone asking me like what they were like kind of snotty about it. They were like, "What does that do for you to keep that there?" And I was like,
What a
"Mother,"
fucking shitty thing to say.
I was like, "I will never take my mom off of my favorites."
I'm
I
like,
like I will punch you in the face. Like no, they lit it wasn't in a nice way. They definitely were like, "What does that do for you?" Like kinda like, "Why are you torturing
yeah.
yourself?" type of comment, and I was just like, "It's my mom.
Yeah. My mom,
That's
I
why."
just looked. I was like, is my mom's still on my phone? My dad's still on my phone. My grandma's still on my phone. Like, and I have taken my mom's number out of my phone because somebody else then,
Yeah, mine has someone
and the
else's.
phones are smart. So they're like, are you sure this is your mom? Because I'm pretty sure it's like Alicia from Modesto. And I'm like,
Fresno, yeah.
I no and no. So like, but I still have a contact card for her with her picture and her email address, right? Like, yeah, what a shitty thing for somebody to say.
Yeah.
And this is like,
And I
yeah,
still think about it, like, when I see it, I'm like, "Why do I still have?" Because they asked it
it
to me and
makes you feel it's a anchor. It's a reminder of home. It's a
yeah.
reminder of your mom, and it's the same thing. Like after my mom died, like I like basically redecorated my whole house with her stuff. And for some people they might have thought that was weird, but for me it was like a way to still be connected to her and reminded of her every day. And I'm like, there's still, as the years have gone by, right? Like it's been what, 12 years, it'll be 12 years this year that my mom's been gone. And it's like, yeah, I'm letting go of little things here and there that I'm like, probably don't need that. But it's just, it takes time. And when you lose that anchor to home, like you got to anchor it somehow in some way, right? Like this is also like when my mom died, I had already I had in about after about 10 years of living in Arizona, I actually wanted to move. Like I was ready to like, I was like kind of feeling like I wanted to like quit and like move and do something different. And then my mom got sick, and then my sister had her brain tumor, and then like my world got like flipped on its end. And so then I was like, well, I don't want to move now because like this is an anchor for me. Like I can't
Mm,
change all that. But then when my mom died, I was like, I really can't leave Arizona now, because now I feel like my whole home base in Northern California has gone away. And so I was like, Arizona now feels like the closest thing to home to me, right? Like, yes, I had my sister still in Northern California, but at that time we weren't as close as we're now. I was like just as close to the people at Athletes Performance Exos. We were very family connection. Like my friends I met through there, they were like family to me. And so when my mom died, like I was like, oh, I'm not ready to live Arizona now. Like I can't do that. I just got abandoned. I can't then abandon everything else. And so it took me another 3 years to just like be in Arizona and start healing myself and just be surrounded with the familiarity of Arizona and my friends there who were like family, and then all of her stuff, before I was like, okay, I'm ready to like venture out again. And that's when I moved.
and
So
what year was that when you moved?
2016.
Okay, 2016, and I moved there in 2017,
Yeah.
so
Well, and I moved at like December 2016.
oh my gosh, and I was probably
Yeah.
early.
Mm.
2017. So we again,
Yeah.
a very wild thing. Like we basically moved to the same city at the same time,
Mhm.
both from California. And it's a wild thing. And then another thing is like we both love seafood.
Yeah.
That was something else. It was like my husband's from Illinois. He's not into it. He just wants steak and potatoes all the time. And I'm like, my gut can't handle this like 5 days a week.
That's
Like, I'm Filipino. I want fish. So we would always meet at this place. Sometimes I know this is weird, but I sometimes daydream about just like flying in and you and I going to, what was it called? The
fishery.
fish. It was, right? Okay. I don't want to say the fishery and just like hanging out, eating, drinking. And then like I'll just have to fly home. Like,
Yeah. I mean, you
why not?
could. You are close enough that you could.
It's close enough.
It
I
is a
could get
very
everything I want, hug, hug, kiss, kiss,
yeah.
we'll connect, eat all the good things, and then I'll fly home and take
Yeah.
care of my family.
Yeah.
It's not doable.
It's very doable.
So this is this is such a fascinating conversation, right? So you're already well established in your career. The other similarity thing too is we have one sibling each that's a
Oh, right.
sister. That's the other like interesting. There's just a lot. So when you're going through this, okay, so how much time from diagnosis to her passing was it? Or if I'm saying the words wrong, like,
Yeah. It was 25 months.
okay, so, and what did they say? Did they say she probably has 2 years or what did,
They didn't like to say, but the likelihood of her having 5 was really low, but that was like kind of the thought process. What it was maybe like closer to 5. At least in my brain, the thought process was closer to 5. I don't know really what the doctor thought. The doctor didn't like to give like prognoses like that because he's like, there's literally no way to tell.
okay. Wait, I'm blanking on the cancer right this
She
second.
had lung
What was it?
cancer.
That's what, okay,
Yeah,
lung.
non-small cell lung cancer.
And does that mean it was on both or
No,
how?
she had it. It was her right. So lung cancer is like usually almost always in the bronchioles, the bronchus. So it was in her right bronchus, and it had spread to I think of the lymph nodes around the lung and some of the lung tissues. So technically, that's metastatic. So it was like stage 3B, which is basically like stage 4. But it was
Okay.
only on her right side. She actually never got it on the left side, but then as it spread to the liver, and then we're not the liver, sorry. It actually spread to the omentum. So all throughout her gut in the like mesentery omentum, which not sometimes that happens when it's in the lymph nodes, but it wasn't in her lymph nodes. It was like literally in the omental mesentery connective tissue. And actually the doctor said that that was really interesting because that's not a standard like metastases progression for lung cancer, which he said that just showed that they were doing a good, like she was fighting it well, and that she actually had it for a really long time. Because he's like,
My
sometimes you
gosh.
don't see those types of metastases because people die before those happen. But like a typical pattern for metastases in lungs is like liver, bone, and brain. So, and then she did get it in her bones. So it was omentum first. Never really got in her liver, but around her liver, and then bones, and then lastly, probably for like the last month, she was showing symptoms of having it in her brain. In fact, I was listening to voicemails from her the other day, which I'm very grateful that I have saved because sometimes I just want to hear her voice. And one of the last voicemails I have, which was probably about 3 weeks before she passed away, was I wish it. She's like, "Hi Anna, I just called to tell you that I like." It was a random word, like I like pencils or something like that. And she's like, "That's it. Okay, I'll talk to you later." And I was just like, "Yeah, that was the end of the beginning of the end for sure."
What an
And it was right around a
that's
weekend when my sister was like, "Mom's not doing very good. You should probably come home." And so I was like, "Yeah." And I got there, and she was just like, "Yeah." The thing she was saying was very kind of like out there. And so I was
mhm.
like, we were like, "Oh yeah, it's definitely in her brain now."
And how old are you at this time?
I had just turned 33.
Okay. So your sister was how old?
She was 37 and
Trying to so
just had a
no
3-year-old.
okay, that's what I was gonna say. So then how old was Sophie? So okay, so
Sophie had just turned 3.
3.
And it's interesting because when my mom was diagnosed, Sophie was 1, and she just really wanted to live long enough for Sophie to remember her. And we kind of had said that, like, I have I have memories from when I was 3. And so we were like, Sophie being 3 was kind of the target. So it's interesting to me that like Sophie turned 3 and then within 3 weeks, my mom passed away.
It's not explainable that that happens that way, it's like
Yeah.
that's divine.
And it's interesting. Sophie doesn't like talk about necessarily like specific memories of her, but she definitely remembers her love
She does.
and has a lot of sadness.
Does she?
So, and I think collectively, Sophie, my oldest niece, is like even she has her sadness, which I think it's actually probably even harder for her because she doesn't have those memories, but she just feels sad. And she knows she misses her Grammy a lot.
Yeah, but
Which is
she's
really
so
interesting, and
little.
that just tells you like to me that's like it makes sense why she has so much grief and sadness from that loss, even though she doesn't remember the memories, is because like my mom gave all of us, including Sophie, like such like nervous system safety, like such a feeling of like safety. And so like, her 3-year-old to lose that was tough. And then on top of that, like not only do you lose that bit of safetiness for your nervous system and regulation as a 3-year-old, but then your mom and your aunt and the people around you also lose it. And so our nervous systems get dysregulated and it can't be there as much for her too, right? So
Yeah, like you're falling apart. You're
yeah.
crumbling.
So, and we were before the phone call talking about just how Sophie's doing. And, she has a lot of,
It's literally like the body keeps a score. Like
yeah.
she can't explain it. She just knows immense grief and sadness came from somewhere around 3, and
Mm-hmm.
it's such a wild, like I said, just effed up ride.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think, I've always been like, even when my mom was sick, I'm the type of person that is like, always like, well, this sucks, but like, where's the silver lining? Like, where's the bright parts of it, And like, the flip side always of grief in my book is like, it only hurts this bad because you got so much, like, you were so loved and you got to experience like such a wonderful connection with somebody and like such deep love. It's like, that's the flip side of it. And even the flip side of the going through the 2 years of her illness was every day when she got diagnosed, even though it's like, it sucked. I tried to look at it as like, this is a gift. This is a gift to know someone's days are numbered. We don't all get that gift. Like I have some friends who lost people in a car accident, like in a day, like in an instant, right? Like you weren't prepared for it. Like it, as much as cancer sucks, sometimes it is a gift because it lets you know like the days with your loved ones are numbered and like make the most of them, like, so it's like from the minute she was diagnosed, like even though I lived in Arizona at the time and couldn't be with her every day, like every time I could get away from Arizona, there's nowhere else I would rather be.
You know where you can be. You go as fast as you can.
Yeah. And so, and I'm forever grateful for Athletes Performance Exos when I worked there because they were basically like, go, be there as much as you need. Like, we'll figure out a way for you to work remotely. And this was, before remote work was a
For
thing.
remote.
Yeah. And
I was
so,
like, wow, that's amazing.
yeah. And so they were just like, whatever you need, like do your thing and take care of her and take care of yourself and let us know how we can support you, sort of thing. So, I was really grateful for that. But at the same time, like sometimes I think like, man, I wish I would have like just quit and moved home and taken care of her for those 2 years. But in my mind, it was going to be 5 years, right? Like I thought we would have more time. And so I don't regret I don't regret going back and forth. And then also too, like, I know I have a tendency when it comes to taking care of the people I love is to like stop taking care of myself. Back then too, I didn't even taking care of myself. I didn't do a good job of anyways. But still having work and still being part of something I loved and part of something else, as opposed to just being like in the grief and with my mom the whole time, was like, I needed that. And so I needed that because had I not been, I would have just been engulfed even more than I
Literally swallowed by
exactly.
the whole, yeah, you'd
Yes.
be
I mean,
in
yes.
it.
And that was, I mean, the whole thing was a whole tipping point in my life in terms of like the realization that like part of the reason why this sucked for my mom is, and even probably part of the reason why she was there in the first place, is because she always put everybody else first and never took care of herself. And she had just retired and was looking forward to like all this stuff in retirement, and she didn't get to do any of that. Like she literally retired and then got diagnosed with cancer and died. And so I was like, oh my God, like I up until this point I was doing the exact same thing. I never took time off. I was a workaholic, working all the time in a field that I was constantly taking care of everybody else. Like if I wasn't taking care of athletes, I was taking care of my friends and my coworkers and like doing all the things. And I wasn't ever taking care of myself. And so I just had this realization of like I'm literally on the same path that she is. And so I'm like, I don't want to get to my retirement and that be it. Like work so hard and not get to enjoy any of it. And so that, you know, within a few months of her passing away, I realized like I need to quit and I need to like take care of myself, give myself space to heal and like grieve, and then also like figure out how to, well, not even figure out, like also just like why not just go on trips and do the things you want to do now? Like why do I have to wait till I'm retired? Like that's silly. And like so after I quit, so she passed away in end of September. I basically quit in January, but I stayed till through March because it was like the busy season for Exos. And so once March came around, that was like my actual last day. And I basically like, I mean, I worked a little bit because I loved it and I loved the athletes I worked for. But for the most part, like I just would tell people that I'm like semi-retired and I'm living the retired life for my mom because she couldn't. And within that, I was also like, venturing into what it looks like to take care of yourself better. From going to EMDR appointments and like meditating and journaling and like did a yoga training and yoga retreat to like just feeding myself, like all the things, right? Like doing all the things and really understanding like sort of what made me tick. And like I was somebody who would like notoriously my whole life like never like give energy, give air, give breath to how I felt, how I was feeling. I would just stuff all my feelings and just ignore them. And so it was like finally a realization of like, yeah, probably shouldn't do that. That's not the healthiest thing. So it was a really like healing journey and like feeling and learning how to feel. And that just also coincided with a professional like realization of like learning how to feel through my hands more and learning how valuable and how much wisdom we have in our bodies when we just start feeling more. And so like, it was all a big lesson, and then there's a lot to be grateful for in it. And there was a professional lesson of like a connection to even my mom's diagnosis. That was a huge like tipping point in life. So it's like I would give it all up, obviously, to have her back in a second, even for like 2 days. But I think sometimes the only way to like be okay with the sadness and the grief that is there forever, by the way, it doesn't go away, is to like find the silver lining in things and see the other side of it. And then also I always tell people whenever they go through a loss is like remembering that like that person, even if the person was not like genetically a part of you, like that person being part of your world and being in a relationship with you of any kind is like literally become part of you. Like you're moving through the world like as them too. And so it's like they don't go away just because they're not like physically on earth anymore. Like they're my mom's not gone. She's like, my sister and I are living, breathing parts of her.
Yeah.
And
Like
boy,
the best parts of
the
her.
yeah, and then also like, boy, I look at my sister and I'm like, I tease her. I'm like, hey mom, what's up? Like,
I mean, you
we
both
joke.
really look like your mom.
Yes, and we just joke that like my mom really wanted us both in the room when she passed away. I was there the whole day with her, holding her hand. I knew it was her last day when we woke up, and I called Molly and I was like, "This is it. You need to get over here." But my sister really had a hard time wanting to be in the room. She literally didn't come in the room until the very end. And it's like she came in finally, she sat down, and my mom like took her last breath. And the joke is that like literally she exhaled and then that just went right into my sister. And my sister like became her, which is kind of a
Wow.
funny scene, but that is kind of how it felt.
Like
Yeah.
that's what she was like, I'm leaving, so
Yeah, here you
you
go.
are now me.
Yes.
Wow. Well, see, I didn't know you were there with your mom or
Yeah.
Molly, your
Yeah.
sister. So that moment, although hard, that's like super sacred. A
Absolutely.
lot of people don't get to like see their loved ones like cross over.
Yeah. And I think it's very well, this is like one of those things too. Like sometimes I'm like, you gotta ask your parents what they want. Like my mom was very vocal that she wanted that. I never flat out asked my dad, but I kind of got the vibe that he didn't want us there. He was a very like prideful person sometimes, and I don't really think he wanted us there. And actually he did. It was one of those scenarios where like he passed away when like after everybody left his hospital room. They left to like I think my stepmom went out to get something, and then it happened, and
Wow.
my sister was like having a hard time with the thought of like not being there. And I wasn't there, but I also decided I didn't want to be there because I was like, you know what? Like I've already seen one of our parents pass away and I don't really want to go through that again unless he specifically wants it. Like if he wants us there, I'll be there in a heartbeat. I was like, but that's not the vibe I'm getting from dad. Like the vibe I'm getting from dad is sort of like he wants to be by himself. And I feel like as sacred of a moment it is for everyone, it's also like it still needs to be their choice. And you still need to like be okay with that, which is
Yeah.
also why I'm like, these are conversations you should have with your parents. Like, what do you want? What do you want in your last days? Like, what is your perfect scenario? Like, if you could choose the way you go out, do you want us there? Do you not want us there? Do you want to be in a certain spot? And these are the same kind of conversations that should go with like, do you want to be cremated? If you want to be cremated, where do you want your ashes to be? Like,
Yeah.
do you want a funeral service? Like, what do you like? What are your wishes? And I think the conversations around death in general and illness and like people dying is like one of my goals sometimes is to just like share, because we don't share, like it's part of life. Like from the moment we are born, we are all marching towards that end. And the fact that as a society we tend to dance around it is kind of wild to me, because I'm like, it is such a, like, who knows what happens when you die, right? Like there's no way of anyone knowing. And regardless of what your belief system is, like, believe whatever you want, which is great and you should, but I'm also like, there's no way to know if what you believe actually is what happens. And so I'm like, to me too, it's like I could see why it feels like a scary time, which is like, why wouldn't you want to ask your loved one like how you can support them in that moment? So
Yeah, people are just scared. It's like when something happens like death or loss of a baby or miscarriage, things like that. It's like you don't know what to say.
yeah.
We haven't been exposed to enough of these conversations, so we don't have skill in
Mm-hmm.
it. And I always tell people like I don't even know what to say, and I have a lot of experience unfortunately, but it's more about just doing what you know is right. Like instead of like call me if you need anything.
Like just call.
No, call.
Like, let the
Or
person decide if they wanna answer the phone or, like,
yes.
like
Don't wait for them. They're not going to. Just send the food.
yeah.
Don't ask them if you can send food. Just
Mhm.
send it.
Send it.
Just do it. Just call them. Just send the food. Send the gift that you want to send. Don't ask. Oddly, one of the biggest supports I had during these really dark times was food. Like there was one time when my mom was passing, and I think just like a whole day had gone by, but time is weird when your parents pass. And I'm like, I don't freaking know what day it is. I don't know what time it is. And one of my aunts, I can't forget it, right? Because she was pulling me away from my mom, like prying me off of my mom. And I was like, how dare you? Like, I'm not leaving my mother's side. And she was like, you need to eat. And I was like, I do not need to eat. Anyways, she somehow got me off the bed with my mom. My mom was there. I like went to sushi, had a beer, kind of revived myself for like an hour or something, came back and kind of had more energy to support my mom and stuff. But it was just an interesting thing and then food would get delivered. And it was like, that was so supportive. I'll never know who it was from because the memories of that time are also like kind of weird, but it's like, that's helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. My sister and I, like, no one brought us food or anything. Like, we were very kind of on our own after my mom passed away. It was very interesting. So yeah, doing things like that, I try to do. The other thing too, I always tell people, and like I always try to be good about when people go through losses like this, is like to ask them about their people. Like, what was your mom
It's a
like?
good
What
one.
was your dad like? Like, tell me a memory. And like, because that's the other thing, like people are like, oh, your mom passed away, and then that's it. Like, they don't want to
Yeah,
ask
they're like,
questions. And I'm like, I would love for you to ask me what her name was, like what she did, like, you know what I mean? Like, why, just like you would if they were alive, like, why wouldn't you want to ask this question? There's like nothing that feels better than to be able to talk about them. Right? Because we're already very acutely aware of they're not here.
yes,
Because
we are
they're not
aware of this.
here, we don't get an opportunity to talk about them a lot. And so it's like when people ask questions, like it means a lot because I'm like, oh, yes, I get to talk
Let
about
me
mom.
tell you about them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's like, buyer beware. If you're friends with me, I'm going to be talking about my mom a lot because she is still and was a very important part of who I am and what I do. And like, she's an important part of my life and she will always be. And which I feel grateful for because I know not everybody has that kind of relationship with their parents. So it's like space to hate your parents still, and when they die, be not that sad. Like, I think that's a very valid thing. Like, some people like feel weird because they are like, I'm not really that sad. I'm like, well, that's fine. That's totally allowed.
Yeah. You could also not have a good relationship with your parents
And be
and they
sad.
pass and then be sad.
Yeah.
Because all of it is allowed.
Yeah. Actually, I talk about that a lot with my dad's loss, which I'll talk about in a second. But anyways, I was just at an Oregon home game the end of November, and I was trying to remember like the last home game I went to. Like, I go to an Oregon game almost every year, but usually it's an away game because it's, a little harder to get to Eugene, and it's during my busy season, so I don't always go. And so I was going, and I was like, man, when's the last game I was there? And I was like, oh my gosh, I remember the last game I was at. It was in 2014, and it was like September 2014, and it was a very significant game in my brain and in my heart because it was the first time I went back to a game after my mom passed away. And before my mom got sick, I had season tickets, and I thought like Oregon football was like life, like literally Oregon football above everything. And my mom being sick, like I said before, when she got sick, I didn't want to go anywhere but to her. So I had let my tickets go away. And actually, the week before she died, there was this game that I'd had on my calendar for literally like 10 years prior. Oregon and Tennessee had signed this home and away series game, and I'd gone to the game in Tennessee with my friend Jeremy, and we were planning to go to the Eugene game, and they were like 3 years apart, and they got signed like 5 years. So it like literally was an 8-year thing. And my mom knew how important this game was to me. And the Tuesday before the game, game's on Saturday, she hadn't been doing well. I'm like, I'm not sure if I should leave. Like, the next day, the Wednesday, she had the most lucid day she'd had in a really long time. She was like, had visitors all day long. She was talking. She hadn't been talking a lot. She was making sense. She was just, you would have never known she had cancer. And she just was doing so well that day. She ate, like she hadn't been eating, and she ate. And it was like, and she told me, she's like, honey, you should go to that game. I know you don't want to leave me, but you should go to that game because that game's been on your schedule forever. So I left for the game, and my sister, I left early Thursday morning and then flew to Portland. And then Friday, we're driving down to Eugene for the game. And the closer we got to Eugene, like the farther away from the Portland airport we got, the more anxiety I started to get. And I was like, I don't think I should be here. Like, I can't be here. And I called my sister crying from the, we were doing a tour of campus for my friend Jeremy, and we were at Hayward Field, which is the old track. And I remember just bawling and calling my sister, and I was like, I just, like, can you give me an update on mom? Like, I don't think I should be here. And then my sister's like, well, I didn't want to tell you, but after you left on Thursday, like, she hasn't like been able to talk. She's not eating again. Like, she like, like that Wednesday was like just this random special day, right? So I basically was like, okay, I gotta go. So I got a flight out of Eugene on Friday, and I came home, and I ended up watching the game at my mom's house on Saturday, and like being a little bummed that I wasn't there, but like also like, again, there's no place I would rather be. And then she ended up dying on that Tuesday. And so the year later, when I went to that first home game, like that was like a big deal because it was like a return to Funana, a return to things that was like brought me a lot of joy in my life. And so it was really interesting going back there this year, because I was like, wow, I can't believe it's been 10 years. And like, so interesting that was the last game I was at, which was this like a return to going back to games. And like, it was just like, also I was like, oh, like, I was with Devin, and I was like, let me tell you the story about the last time I was here and why it was so special. And the cool part was, it was such a special game for me to be there. And then it was a very special game for him. He was playing in that game. And so I was like, so crazy that game for me was so special because it was the first time after my mom passing away. I was like, but then it's like, it was a game that he played in as a freshman and just was like balled out. And it was like a huge game. And so I was like,
the 2014 one,
yeah,
for him. Oh,
yeah. I was like, it was just really cool to see such a juxtaposition between like two experiences, right?
Yeah, at the same time.
So, but it was also a reminder of like, yeah, that was 10 years ago, but hey, can I tell you the story about my mom? Because it was like, it's just like a big connection for it. So anyways, I know that was a huge tangent, but it was just like a reminder of like, yeah, I want to be able to talk about my mom still with people.
Yeah. Listen, tangents are life.
Yeah.
I've learned. Life. Hashtag tangents are life.
Yeah. Oh, that's that. I was going to say too, I told you I'd say about my dad. I love my dad very much and was very sad when he passed, but also the grief was very different than it was with my mom. I think partly because I had learned how to feel with the journey with my mom, but then also I had actually this feeling when my dad passed away of a finality of grief too, if that makes sense, which made me realize that my whole life I had been grieving my dad, and I had been grieving my dad in a way that, because he was not always very present for us growing up. And so I think that I had the realization, like when I was a kid, the feelings that I was feeling around that I didn't recognize as grief for the loss of a dad, even though your dad is still there, if that makes sense. And so it wasn't until he died and he was actually lost that I was able to recognize, like, oh my gosh, I've been feeling this my whole life with him. And so it was a very interesting scenario because of course I was sad. I still miss him very much, but I was like, it was almost like an exhale of like, okay, like I can actually grieve him for real now. Like I can recognize that I've been grieving this loss forever. And like now that it's here, it actually feels better.
It's finite.
It doesn't mean I was happy that my dad died. Not at all. But it was also like a realization of like, whew, I have words, I have like an explanation for all these feelings I've felt for 40 years. So it's really interesting. So that kind of what reminded me of
Yeah.
what you had said too, is like, no matter what kind of relationship you have with your parents, however you feel is how you feel, and it's okay. There's not like a
Yeah.
perfect way to feel or perfect way to grieve. And I also feel like I always tell people, like, spoiler alert, it's around forever.
Right. It doesn't go away. You don't it's just it I think of it like the ocean waves. There's always waves.
Mhm.
But some days they're really, really tiny and gentle and soft, right? And other days, they
Yeah.
will literally try to drown you.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And some days you're
Absolutely.
floating, and some days it's cold, and some days it's hot. And so, like, well, not ever hot, but you know what I mean? Like the ocean, it's like the ocean waves. They're always there. Some days they're small, some days they're
Yeah.
big. Some days you like them, some days you're like, wow, that's too loud. It's just, it's always there. So, well, another parallel we have is that's the exact way I felt about my dad's relationship. He was basically dying my whole life.
Yeah.
Death is final. So I don't know if relief is the word, but it just was like,
Yeah.
that's final. There is nothing after this. It's he's gone. Well, two things that I would like to wrap up with. One, I'd love to hear about your mom and her name and tell us a story about her.
No.
I can't not. I just really want to hear about her now.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, I was also like, oh, looking at the time, I'm like,
I know
I
I
don't know if
have
this has been helpful for anybody at all, but also,
we're going to get you off on time, but we're going to hear two things. One about your mom and then I'll ask you a question at the end.
yeah, my mom's name was Cindy Rosenberg. She was a pretty wonderful, was a pretty wonderful woman. I don't know, like a funny, like a good, like she was the mom that like was the cool mom in high school. She
Oh,
was okay with us all drinking. She was like the mom that was like, you can drink as long as I know you're being safe, sort of thing. So all my friends really enjoyed my mom. She was fun in that sense. I also like, there's no way I could ever lie to my mom. For some reason, my mom like always knew. I'm a terrible liar, which could be possible, or she had a way of
it's
always knowing.
both.
It's
It's
both.
both,
Mom
right? Like
just
she's
knows.
piercing right through you. Yeah.
But yeah, she was like my best friend. I talked to her like every day, and but she yeah, I mean, me and my sister were like her life. Everything she did was for us and because of
Yeah.
us, and so very grateful for that. And she was like 4'11", like little short curly haired Jewish woman. Uh,
This
so-
is a weird question, but I can say it because I know. It's like, what was something super annoying about her that now you like miss? Where you're just like, Mom, come on. Or like, I have so many of those.
yeah, I mean, my mom loved to read. She loved to read. She loved crosswords. She was an accountant. She was very good with numbers. Like she just loved numbers. Like so, a good Sudoku puzzle. Like she would love to just like
She's that lady.
her favorite thing was either reading or doing Sudoku and having like barbecue chips and a Coke. And like that was like her favorite thing. And like you couldn't like get her attention to that. Like when we were kids, sometimes she'd be reading and like so into the book that when we would bother her and be like, Mom, like when's dinner? Or like what's for dinner? Or like what are like come on, like hello, you got two kids that need you right now. And she'd be like, you're grounded, go to your room. Like she would ground us for interrupting her during a book. We'd be like, well, we didn't even do anything. She's like, I don't care. You're grounded, go to your room.
She's like, I have my chips. I have my soda. I'm
Yeah,
reading. You
leave me
see
the fuck
this.
alone. Exactly.
You are now grounded.
And
Oh my
so
gosh, that's hilarious.
so that's kind of really funny. And then she would also, we had this little in our kitchen, we had this little tiny like little walk-in pantry between like in the corner of the kitchen between the refrigerator and the
I can picture it. Yeah.
dishwasher, and we had this little step stool inside and this little light that you pulled the string that the light, and sometimes she would just go and sit in there and read or take a phone call in it. And this was before cordlesses, right? So you'd have a cord, that like curly cord of the phone going across the kitchen into the pantry, and that was just like her quiet space for us to get away from us. But yeah, she'd ground us a lot for interrupting her. And but then, obviously after, she'd be like, "Oh, I'm just kidding, you're not grounded, sorry I did that." So
That's
and the
amazing.
funny thing with the barbecue chips is like Sophie loves like Sophie and Ella love barbecue chips like my mom did. And so whenever they eat barbecue chips, I think my sister and I are both like,
You're like, go ahead.
like, all they need is a Coke and a cigarette, and they're just like, "Oh, mom."
Yeah.
And
Oh,
that's
that's
like the
so
other
amazing.
thing too with Sophie and her connection. Besides the barbecue chips, Sophie's also very good at with numbers. Like my mom would just like probably love that Sophie is like 1%
Wow.
like her. So
Jeez, I am not good with numbers. Okay, one, I didn't know I was going to be crying so much during this, but geez, it actually
I mean,
feels
in
really
your
good
defense, maybe I would have cried more, but the dry eye, like I have a hard time tearing now since the pink eye.
since she's been recovering from pink eye for how many weeks? I feel like it's been like 6 weeks.
And since I got it was November 5th, and I'm still I don't have it anymore, obviously.
Yeah, but dealing with, oh
Yeah, the
my
doctor
gosh.
said my vision would be affected for like 3 or 4 months.
Anna does not recommend getting viral pink eye.
0 of 10.
0 out of 10
Mhm.
all thumbs down.
Yeah.
Negative 5 stars. Oh my goodness. Okay, one, it was so good to see you and catch up with you. And I know that my community is going to love this talk. It was so special. And thanks for creating space and feeling safe enough to share all those things.
Absolutely.
So, to end, if you could tell your younger self anything, whether it's during a low, dark time in your life or just in general, what is one thing you would say to your younger self?
Man, I would be like, eat more food. There's no point in starving yourself. You're actually doing the reverse. And there's so much more to you than how you look. Like, no need to like obsess about that. I like that. Sometimes I think back of when I was Sophie's age, and I'm like, I mean, we waste so much time in our young lives caring about how we look
All the time.
all the time.
The whole
And you know what? Like when somebody, like this is a perfect example. At no point when you asked me who my mom was I like told you how much she weighed. Like who the fuck
what
cares?
size her pants
Yeah,
were. Like
like
no
who
one,
the
no
fuck
one,
cares? You know what?
no
And
one
also like
cares.
the fact that she was overweight going into battle cancer was actually probably a good thing, because that
She had something to
she had something to lose. And like going into terminal illnesses like that with no body fat, like you don't last very long without a lot of body fat. And so like it's kind of silly. Yeah, so that's actually probably what I would tell myself is like, it's like eat
eat
some
more
food
food.
and you'll probably feel better all around. And like actual food, not the
Yes.
actual food I was eating back then.
No, like
Eat
eat
food, eat real
eat
food.
food.
Yeah,
Food. Actual
probably not
food.
Hostess cupcakes.
Oh my gosh. My dad used to give me those.
That pantry, we would hide in that pantry and we would eat my mom had to hide them because my
White
sister and I,
swirl. I can't even.
and Fruity
Okay.
Pebbles. Whew.
Those are good. I was a Cocoa Puffs girl. The chocolate milk at the
My
end because
sister
it was
too, yeah.
chocolatey.
I never no.
Mm,
Oh my gosh.
no.
When I think of that question, when I think of that and I think like eat protein, eat like it doesn't actually matter how you look, and like looking back you looked fine in the first place. I remember doing the cabbage diet, like the hospital cabbage diet. Did you ever do that as a kid?
No.
Oh my gosh. When I was a teenager.
Sounds horrible. Sounds like farts.
Yeah, you basically like cook cabbage and then only eat the broth for days.
Nope. Never even heard of this.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, our house smelled like farts from the cooking the cabbage. Yeah, that was the
Like that's
beginning
what
of an eating disorder. I just like I recently realized that I even had my whole life. Right.
that's a kind of a big realization. So
It was. Yeah. But I'm
that's
like, oh
something to
yeah,
work
I
through.
guess I do remember binging and restricting when I was starting at the age of probably 12. And it was totally normal, right? Because society.
Fun times.
So yeah, that's what I would tell my younger self.
Eat more food, and who cares how you look, because it really doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
I know you have to tell your next person you're a little late.
It's
Tell them
okay.
I love them and I appreciate them.
Okay.
And it's for the greater good.
Yeah.
It's all going out into the abyss. So thank you. I love you.
welcome.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you in the next episode. And how to contact Anna?
Yeah.
Super easy, I'm assuming.
Yeah, Movement Rev, at Movement Rev. Movement and then REV website.
Rev.
Instagram. Obviously, you'll link it all in the show notes. My podcast is the Unreal Results podcast. So I have actually a couple episodes specifically about my mom and her lung cancer and how it's influenced my practice, as well as grief and all how I've dealt with it and like practical like ways to work through grief. So I'll make sure you have the links to those too.
That's perfect. Okay, perfect. And then I'll put those in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Bye. I'll talk to you soon.